Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today, our special guest is Ms. Michelle Adelman. She is the founder of Accite, Go Fresh, Infinite Foods, and Crossover Meats, all of which are focused on sustainable food and agriculture in Sub-Saharan Africa. So welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And it's actually great. I'm actually in the States today. So usually I'm doing these from the farm in Botswana, and I'm, kicking all of the growers off of the internet so that I have a stable connection. So, cross fingers, I'm okay today.
That's what I love. I mean, when you and I first started chatting, you were like, okay, I'm in Africa, I'm traveling a lot, I'll be back on the stage. So you do travel there quite frequently,
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. But before we dive into all the companies you started in management consulting. And then what brought you to work on impact investing and agriculture in Africa?
Yeah. So getting out of management consulting wasn't so difficult. I'd been at Accenture for 20 some years, so I guess maybe it was difficult. And I had an amazing career and really cool experiences, working globally, working with large, Global 1000 clients. And I was recruited away to start a new healthcare company that was funded by a private equity firm in New York. And so their model was, build a business plan, hire an Accenture partner, a lot of female partners actually, give them a pile of money and say, go start a company. So I was recruited away to go do that. But in between, I had some time off for the first time, in 20 something years. So I traveled to Africa for the first time. And I'd worked all over the world. I'd worked in Asia and Europe, a little bit in Latin America, but I'd never been to Africa. So I went on vacation and, was supposed to be going and, being one with the universe and turning off my BlackBerry at the time. And about 3 days in, I was like, okay, there's another zebra. What are we gonna do now? So I ended up spending a lot of time sitting around the campfire, drinking coffee and talking to the staff. And I just really became fascinated with what was going on. And this is, 2010. So it's kind of on the backside of the HIV/AIDS crisis in Southern Africa. And, there's two things that really struck me in those conversations. One is this impact of the HIV crisis on children. So like in a little country like Botswana that only has 2 million people, there's over 100,000 children that lost one or both of their parents to HIV. And then you've got the other thing that always struck me was the unemployment rate of young people. So the youth unemployment rate is 40%. So not 4 or 14, but 40. And so when you're dealing with issues of children, it all ultimately goes back to the caregiver. And if the caregiver is unemployed, you're kind of not really making any long-term difference. And so having gotten out of a consulting, successfully helped start this new healthcare company, I thought it would be a fantastic idea to take a 2-year sabbatical, pack all my worldly belongings in a shipping container, sell my apartment on Park Avenue, and go try to build what I thought were going to be little small cottage businesses to help create employment for women. And 10 years later, I'm still in, and they're no longer like little cottage businesses, and they're almost, they're all exclusively focused on food and agriculture.
Now, your first company, Accite, Sustainable Food and Agriculture, and that just blossomed into Go Fresh and Infinite Foods. Could you talk about that progress of first to the second to third to Infinite?
Yeah. So when I started Infinite, I had my investment, this was my first time, out on my own doing my thing. So I was like, what did those guys at, Accretive do? So I was like, okay, you have to have your investment thesis. So, my investment thesis was I wanted to go and create businesses that created net new economic activity. So one of the problems in Southern Africa, and, in Africa in general, is there's a lot of trade, like, moving goods back and forth. There's a lot of digging stuff out of the ground, right? A lot of metals and mining, and some financial services and some telecom, and a lot of government, and not much of anything else. And I grew up in Buffalo, like we make stuff, my family's engineers, I'm an engineer, like we like to make things. And I was like, where's the stuff being made around here? And it just wasn't there. So I wanted to create businesses that would create net new economic activity in the market. I wanted to use technology as a catalyst for change, to create something new where it didn't exist before. I wanted that technology to be sustainable and renewable and to protect the planet instead of digging things out of the ground. And I wanted to create employment for youth and women. So those were my criteria. So I looked at all sorts of things. I dabbled in solar projects. I bought a recycling plant, which was a super bad idea. The least of which is because the books were cooked. But eventually I started GoFresh. So GoFresh was really my first foray into agriculture. So what we did is we used, very high-tech hydroponic greenhouses. And we said, well, how do we apply this in our local context, in our local business model? Because to me, that's where the magic happens, right? The technology works, or the greenhouse works no matter where it sits. It's just, how do you implement it in the local context? So what I was trying to figure out how to do, just like we had just, you have big solar and you have distributed solar, you have big industrialized farms and mega farms, and you have small farms, right? So I was trying to figure out, how small could you make a commercial sized farm be so that you could grow the produce right next to the consumer, so that you could create employment in a local community. You could take the transportation and the spoilage out of that produce. You could have a fresher and more nutritious product, because fresh produce loses 30% of its nutrients in the first 3 days after you harvest it.
Absolutely.
And, and if you put like a big mega greenhouse, like if I took one of my greenhouses and I only grew cucumbers, right? Like everybody would have to eat cucumbers, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's like way too many cucumbers for a community.
Yeah.
So it was like, how small can I make it? And can we create a distributed farming model using greenhouses, so we can put these? And the other thing with Africa is things outside the cities tend to be very far apart, and that road infrastructure is really crap in between. So moving fresh produce from one place to another is a super bad idea, because it's hot, it's going to spoil, it's got to go long distances. You're traveling on a bumpy road, so your tomatoes turn into sauce along the way. So anyway, so this was it. So that was GoFresh. And obviously we started in Botswana because Botswana is a small country, so it's a little bit easier to go pilot and experiment things with things there, because it's a little bit easier to navigate. It's free flow of currency, so you don't have exchange controls.
Government was easy to deal with there.
Yeah, a little bit easier to deal with, and it's the desert, right? So frankly, if you could pull it off in Botswana, nobody's going to tell you you can't grow anywhere else, right? I mean, it's basically like the worst place in the world to grow anything. It's super hot. The bugs are like Jurassic Park. They've been surviving in this desert. So I was like, I can pull this off. Everybody, I can do this anywhere. So that's how.
So Michelle, what were some of the things that, let us know more about? What were some of the things in the beginning that you were just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about, and then you kind of figured it out along the way? And what were your learning lessons in trying to bring, fresh food to the desert, basically, and to an underdeveloped country?
Yeah.
What were your epiphanies?
What were my epiphanies? Well, one of them is, you have to deal with the infrastructure that you've got, right? So, I mean, one of the so we had power, right? But we plugged in the greenhouse, and, I was frying the computer, the computer cards that drove the computer control system. Like, I was frying one like every week. I was like, what the heck's going on, right? And then you realize you've got power, but it's coming out of the coal plant, and it's dirty in many ways, right? Like, not only is it came from a dirty source, but it actually has really big voltage fluctuations, which, computer equipment kind of doesn't like. So some of it was around, how do you take and kind of Africanize or industrialize the technology so that it will work in your harsh environment, right? And yes, the technology does work, but sometimes you have to create a little cushion around it to protect it from this environment that you're dealing with. That was one. I mean, the second is the real investment in people. And we tried a whole bunch of different human resource models. And ultimately, what I landed on and I continue to do today is we hire youth right out of college, and I literally train them from scratch. Because I find that the types of jobs that they get, they're either with government or they're with these big corporations where it's more about process than it is about outcomes and accountability. And once they've worked in that environment, they lose all of their entrepreneurial skills, right? Or mentality. So it's much better to hire young people right out of college and train them. And I guess the other big epiphany is, when you're trying to break molds like this, you have to deal with cultural barriers. So for example, horticulture is not really a thing in Botswana. I mean, primarily agriculture is cattle. And cattle rearing, and everybody knows how to do that, or small stock. And, you can kind of sit underneath the tree and watch the cattle do their thing. A high intensity horticulture operation is 24/7, 365 days a year. And so trying to create that new generation of skills and mentality about how you run a horticulture operation versus how you raise cattle has been a really interesting challenge. So there's lots, I can talk about business partners. I can talk about dealing with financiers. I can talk about, how you get things across borders, but I mean, for me, those are some of the really important ones.
So what are some of the, for those of us who are used to going to Ralph's or a grocery store locally, I'm just curious, what are some of the vegetables and the produce and the agriculture that's able to be produced in an arid environment like that?
Yeah. And part of it depends on there are big disparities, just like America, right? There are very big disparities between, the elite and the working class, right? So we happen to have our model very tuned from a commercial perspective. So we make our money off of growing product for the tourism and the food service industry. So restaurants and the safari industry. So we grow 15 different types of culinary herbs. We grow fancy lettuce, everything from romaine to butter lettuce. We grow cherry tomatoes. We introduce things like yellow cherry tomatoes. Nobody had ever seen one before. Cucumbers, peppers. So we grow those types of produce for profit, right? Basically for the safari industry. And then we grow kind of mass market produce for the local market. So we grow spinach and cabbage and butternut squash and tomatoes largely for kind of the wholesale local market. So we've tried to balance our business model so that we are serving the local community with fresh produce while we're able to have a commercially viable model by tapping into some of those higher margin markets.
Oh, wow. With respect to social justice, with providing agriculture, sustainable food, one of the things I want to talk about was access to water. So using hydroponics, you don't need much water. And in my past studies, women are usually the ones that have to go fetch the water.
Yep.
It's usually a few miles away. It's dangerous. So by doing this, I can only assume that it gives women and girls the opportunity to stay in school, get real jobs, get paid, and actually have a better quality of life.
Yeah.
Fair assumption?
Yeah, it's a fair assumption. It goes back to the whole idea of a distributed model, right? So what we've tried to do is we started with 2 farms. So we have one that was just outside the capital of Gaborone, so we could serve the capital, and then we have one way up in the north on the edge of the Okavango Delta, which serves the safari industry. So we're able to basically pull our employees from our local community and create employment for those women. And about 80% of our employees are women. They're head of household. And, the money that they make working at GoFresh is what pays for their kids' school fees and shoes and food and electricity and airtime units and all the things that they need. We have been able to use these very, more conservative ways of using water, because water is certainly scarce due to climate change, the fact that we're in the desert to begin with. And so, we've always tried to use these more controlled irrigation methods so that we can be conservative with the water that we do use and, create as much, local employment as we can.
That's fantastic. Joel?
I know. So I guess I kind of wanted to go back to and just ask a quick question. How was it when you initially wanted to set this thing up, like what were the barriers that you ran into as somebody from the outside coming in, trying to basically show us how to grow vegetables? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been, they must have thought you were just
I thought it
wonderful.
was bananas for one thing.
Yeah.
I think, it's interesting, and people, I think one of the advantages was I was effectively an American woman, and everybody was very confused about what I was doing in Botswana all by myself, trying to figure this out, right? And so I didn't kind of fit into anybody's box, right? Into anybody's stereotype about.
So that, I would imagine that would be able to just be kind of like, we don't know
what this thing is. And part of it is, I think, going back to the consulting and in your management experience, which is the first thing that I did is I went around to the and got letters of intent, right, and got produce purchase intent agreements from the the major wholesalers, the major retailers, and so I had a whole stack of letters before we even broke ground saying, if we build this project, you will buy, you will buy produce from you. So it was around giving myself and the banks that were helping finance the confidence that this project was going to work. And then, obviously bringing, a good financial model and proof points, just like any other, so from that aspect, having a really good financial model and a good financial business plan, at the end, won the day.
And then the areas that you were actually established in, like, how was the response from the locals looking at you going like, okay, we got this woman from America coming in here. Like, how was it to get people to, this sounds terrible and I don't mean for it to, but how does it to get people to understand the Western way coming into this culture, and what's the impact going to be, and how do we work within that?
Well, and it's a challenge. And that's a little bit why I've really focused on hiring youth leaders and putting them at the front of the business. So, the whole entire business is basically run by these young Botswana who I hired directly out of the College of Agriculture, the local university, and we train them from scratch. And we train them in management skills. We train them in how to grow. We train them in project management and how to have communication. And, I very much put them in the front of the business, and I really stepped to the back. And, frankly, because it's the right thing to do, partially because I got two other businesses going on. So I can't be with them 24/7. So they have to learn how to do this, and you have to create a safe place for them to fail and to learn. Right. So we do a lot of failing. We do a lot of failing.
And I love the fact that you encourage that, because some people don't encourage failing, or, go a little hard on people for trying and failing. So encouraging that and saying it's okay to mess it up, we'll fix it. That's huge.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of an expensive habit, but but what? How else are we gonna learn, right? I mean, when everything's going great, you're not learning anything, right? Your point of learning is when you've fallen on the floor and you've got to dust yourself off, and somebody doesn't say, "Oh, you can quit and go home."
Yeah.
Right. The point of learning is when you have to dust yourself off and go do it again, and figure out what you did wrong the last time and do it right the next time, or do it better, right? And then do it better again and do it better again until you're like, oh, okay, I've mastered this.
And it's also encouraging for the youth.
Yeah,
it's encouraging.
It's a lot of work, and it's very and it's tiring, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's really interesting. I'll get messages from supervisors, team leaders that I've had in the past, right? And then they'll leave, and I won't hear from them for 2 years, and then I'll get this message saying, I didn't understand what I had at the time, right? I didn't understand the environment that you were trying to create. I didn't understand the opportunity that you had given me. You weren't standing on my head every day telling me exactly what to do, right? So it's very heartwarming to kind of get those messages from your former team members to say, you know what, looking back on that, I didn't realize how special it was.
So now I want to say, so let's talk about you looking back of all of this time, of all the time that you've been creating this. At what point do you look back and be like, holy crap, we did it? Like, I mean, what do you honestly, what has been your greatest achievement from this whole process?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever do that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm capable. One of my college roommates said to me, you're like kind of like a shark, right? Like, you just got to keep on swimming.
But even they sleep. Even they sleep.
I guess they sleep. Do they swim while they're sleeping?
But they can
I think it's, I like my partner as a, former retired U.S. ambassador, and has kind of watched me through these journeys and sees me beat myself up on a daily basis. And, often it says, you've got to take, exactly what you said, like you've got to take the step back and appreciate what you've done and what you've pulled off, because it's not just Go Fresh. It's, the Infinite Foods business, our crossover meats business. We've been really breaking a lot of glass and breaking a lot of ground. And I just enjoy it. I mean, at the end of the day, trying to create something new where nothing existed before is like my coolest superpower.
No,
that's so motivational, because I mean, on so many levels. I know we're talking about your food business and what you're building in Botswana, but I think that's a message people really need to hear right now, with the Great Resignation and people just trying to figure things out. Look, we're all there, so just dust yourself off, keep moving, and just remember that little nugget in your head that keeps telling you, where you're supposed to be going in life. So, like, I get everything else you're saying, but you just really resonated with me on a personal level as we all just try to figure out, what's what. So sorry to divest.
No. I actually wanted to ask about Crossover Meats. I believe that's your most recent business that you launched.
Yeah, it's my most recent one. So after we built Go Fresh, my next business was Infinite Foods. So Infinite is a plant-based food platform, and we represent all of the leading plant-based food brands, bringing them into Africa. So we've brought Miyoko's, Oatly, Beyond Meat, Just Egg, Good Catch Seafood will be coming this year. If you're a category leading brand and you want to go to Africa, you're basically on our platform.
Oh, wow.
And I'm plant-based. I haven't eaten meat in, I don't even remember when the last time it was. But I had this very weird opportunity. I was out in California, meetings with some of the plant-based players, and I got an email from an advisor who sometimes turfs me things that he doesn't want to do. And I got this pitch, and it was called Eco Meat. The title was like Eco. I was like, Eco Meat. I was like, gosh, like that sounds terrible. Like, who wants Eco Meat? But it turns out it was this Stanford professor who had worked in the same lab as Pat Brown from Impossible Foods, and they were effectively studying the molecular makeup of meat. And he wanted to have a meeting in a cafe in Palo Alto. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not here very often. The best thing to come out of this is I can get a free cup of coffee, and coffee being like, $10 a cup in Palo Alto, and me being a poor farmer, I was like, I'm in for the free coffee. So
love the
so I went and met this professor, and he talked about his innovation, his moment, where he looked at what Impossible had done in terms of trying to recreate meat out of plants, and it's fantastic, right? Love it, love the stuff. But he was like, there's only a couple of problems, right? One is the hamburger's $6, so it's going to make it very inaccessible at a large scale, right, across the world. 2 is it requires a huge amount of behavior change, right, to try to get people to move from wanting to eat meat to moving to a plant-based diet, even if it's the right thing to do for the planet and your health and all sorts of other things. And the 3rd is, we've got scale issues in this whole new plant-based food industry, whether it be, GMO ingredients or GMO processes, or whether it be creating manufacturing infrastructure, whether it be sourcing ingredients at scale, there's going to be scalability issues. So he went back to that same research, and he said, well, what did we learn about how we make meat, right? We make it up of lean muscle tissue and fat and iron, right? Those are the basic 3 components. And so he said, is there not a simpler way? So he effectively figured out how you basically use chicken, poultry, as your primary lean protein and leave the rest the same, right? And by doing so, you basically make a hamburger out of chicken. And, you cut the environmental impact by half because chicken is much more efficient from an environmental impact perspective. You cut the cost by about 20 to 30%. And you're able to deliver the same nutrition, lower trans fats, same iron, same protein, in a format that's highly scalable because, poultry is highly scalable. We've even seen this post-COVID, right? We've seen the poultry market turn around much faster than the beef market.
True.
And, it was a little, and you have to take your hat off, right? Because I'm a huge plant-based food fan. I believe that plant-based is the future of food. I think that's the way that we all should be moving in terms of trying to have a planet by 2050. But if you look at the numbers, we're not moving fast enough, right? No. And we're not going to get everybody to be 100% plant-based by 2050. And then the planet's going to explode and then it's going to suck. So...
oh, good. Okay, so we have
that way, right? So, I really look at crossover as a solution to bridge that gap, right? To bridge the gap from the hardcore red meat carnivore to where we want to go with plant-based, because, we vote 3 times a day about how our diet impacts climate change, right? By the food that we eat. And if we can give people options that are what they want, which is all natural, meat product that's better for the environment and more affordable and gives them all the nutrition and tastes great, to me, this is a bridge to where we want to go, because it also helps educate people about the decisions they're making. Because when you go to your retailer and you say, well, I can buy this ground chicken and beef patty, or I can buy a beef burger, why would I want to buy this, right? So there's a learning point there. And I think, so we're very excited. So we had started the company pre-COVID, done a lot of the strategy, a lot of the legwork, and we were just ready to kick off when COVID hit. Oh, so we kind of got down to like oxygen and water and kept, a small core team on a slow burn through COVID, continuing to do R&D, continuing to work on marketing. And then last summer, we hired a very experienced meat industry salesperson, and we have been off to the races. So we now have gotten distribution agreements with both Cisco and US Foods. So we're corporate build with them. So basically gives us license to hunt all over the US. And we've built about $100 million of pipeline. And I think my first PO is coming in today. So I'm like anxiously watching my phone. So yeah, we're really excited about the product. It's going to be a real challenge to try to launch a new product and a new brand, even in this post-COVID environment, because people are hesitant to change. Restaurants don't want to change menu. They don't want to change cooking in the back of the house because they're having labor issues and consistency issues. And trying to, interrupt people's thinking when all this other stuff is going on is fun.
Well, I think an important message that you guys could discuss with respect to the industrial-sized farming facilities, the industrial cattle that's grown. It's not the cleanest thing you'll ever see.
No, it really isn't.
The most humane thing you'll ever see. I think that's why we're seeing more of a resurgence of local butchers who get their steer or their livestock from local farmers. I highly encourage people to Google that and look at the imagery. I think it'll change your mind on this change that needs to happen, specifically with plant-based foods, or even the chicken hamburger. I don't know what you call it, but chicken burger?
We call it the tasty twosome.
The tasty twosome.
Let that ring around in your head for a little while.
Well, it's funny because I agree completely with what Wendy's saying, but I think Michelle, actually struck on the key word in the whole thing, which is affordability. We're living in a world right now where people generally don't give a crap where they're getting stuff from. They just want to be able to afford to put something on their plate.
Yeah. And hamburgers very much a center of the plate meal, right? I mean, more than 50% of all beef sales in the US is ground beef. It's very much a family meal. It's very much centered to the plate. And so if we can provide, a more environmentally sustainable and affordable option, we're all in.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I love what you guys are doing. I love you have so many. I mean, I had to keep a large list here. You are a busy lady and a lady on the move. And I am grateful for everything that you do to change the world that we're currently in. So I'll just let everybody have their final word before we close out for the day.
No, thank you, Michelle. It's been enlightening, and to watch a fellow woman really try to take this to the next level globally, to a place that's not so much so sexy. You're really doing some great things, and I look forward to having you back on the show.
Yes.
I'd love to. Yeah, no, I'd love to come back and chat.
Oh yeah, we got more to talk about.
Exactly. And then just following you. Can you let people know the best way to get in touch with you or to follow you?
Yeah. So follow me on LinkedIn. I'm not as active as I should be. I'm kind of busy. I was watching one of your. I left Twitter because it just was too depressing. And
people
Yeah.
I didn't like the haters, and it wasn't good for my soul. So Twitter and I had a divorce because it just wasn't good for me. I was watching one of your previous episodes where you were talking about the impact of social media on our psyche and on bullying and these things, and I was like, good, I made the right decision. But yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Michelle at Accite. Look at our websites, infinitefoods.com, crossovermeats.com, gofresh.farm. So it's a little tricky one. Yeah, but I'd love to hear from people. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Joel, do you have any close? Yeah.
No, I just gotta say, I think this is super cool what you're doing. And I love the fact that you're really working to get women and girls in Botswana to become the breadwinners and to kind of really empower their lives. I think that's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And I'm all about the plant-based diet, so I'm with you.
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Me too.
Well, we thank you for your time. And Michelle, I know you're crazy busy. You travel the world. I'm grateful that you made the time for us today. So thank you again for coming. Everyone, please check out Michelle, company Accite. I will put all that info when I post this. And have a wonderful day. I'm Wendy Nystrom with Environmental Social Justice, along with Joel Vendette and Joy Langford. So thank you guys so much. We'll
Thanks,
check you
everyone.
out.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.